Olivia James grew up knowing that life was rarely fair but always worth fighting for. She was just 7 years old when she lost her mother, a woman who had once dreamed of better days but was taken far too soon. With no one else to lean on, Olivia became the anchor for her younger siblings, stepping into a mother's shoes long before she even understood what it meant. Their tiny house with peeling paint and creaky floors stood at the edge of town like a quiet reminder of how much they had lost. But inside, Olivia made sure it was filled with hope, laughter, and a stubborn kind of love that refused to let go. Every morning before school, she packed their lunches with whatever they had, and every night she read them stories by flashlight because the electricity had been cut again. No matter how tired she was, no matter how heavy the world pressed down, Olivia never stopped believing that they were meant for more than just survival. By the time she reached adulthood, Olivia had stitched together a life from sheer willpower and endless hustle. She waited tables through high school, took night classes at the local college, and built a small but thriving career in event planning. With each promotion, each milestone, she carried her siblings with her, cheering them through graduations and first jobs, determined to give them a foundation she never had. So when the day came for her own wedding, it was not just a celebration of love but a triumph over everything that had once threatened to break her. The church was filled with white roses, chandeliers dangled from beams wrapped in ivy, and the soft notes of a string quartet floated through the air like promises. Friends and family who had witnessed every step of her journey showed up with shining eyes and full hearts, knowing that this moment was about so much more than just a dress or a ceremony. It was about resilience, about building a life when the world had given you every reason to give up. Olivia stood at the back of the aisle in a gown she had chosen carefully, not for the label stitched inside it, but because it made her feel strong, beautiful, and whole. The veil was light as air against her carefully pinned curls, and in her hand, she held a bouquet tied with her mother's favorite blue ribbon. Her heart pounded in her chest, not from nerves, but from a profound sense of gratitude. She had made it. Against all odds, she had built a life worth celebrating. As the doors swung open and the music swelled, Olivia stepped forward with a smile that lit up the entire room. Every step she took toward the altar felt like a victory, a silent vow to the girl she used to be and the woman she had fought so hard to become. Looking ahead, she saw Christopher Blake waiting for her, looking every bit the part of the devoted groom. There was a time when she might have questioned if she was worthy of such a moment, but not anymore. Olivia knew her value was not measured by where she came from or what she had endured. It was woven into every act of kindness, every hard decision, every night she had cried herself to sleep and gotten up the next morning anyway. She belonged here, and she deserved every bit of joy that was coming her way. What she did not yet know, standing there in the golden light of the chapel, was that this day would not end the way she imagined. But even that would not break her. Olivia James had fought her way to this altar, and no matter what happened next, she would keep fighting for the life and the dignity she had earned. At first, everything seemed perfect. The music softened, the officiant welcomed everyone with warm words about love and commitment, and Olivia stood beaming, feeling wrapped in the magic of the moment. She barely noticed when Christopher gently squeezed her hand, leaning in with a smile that seemed just a little too tight. When the officiant invited the couple to say a few personal words before their vows, Olivia was ready to pour her heart out. She had practiced them in her head 1,000 times, about how love had found her when she least expected it, and how thankful she was for the life they were about to build together. But before she could speak, Christopher raised a hand politely to the officiant, asking if he could say something first. There was a chuckle among the guests, a few soft smiles. Everyone leaned in, expecting a touching tribute to his bride. Christopher cleared his throat and looked around the room, pausing just long enough to draw everyone's full attention. Then, in a voice filled with false affection, he began. He thanked everyone for coming, joked about how Olivia had made him a better man, and then, almost too casually, he said he wanted to take a moment to acknowledge how far Olivia had come. He spoke about her childhood struggles like they were charming anecdotes, painting a picture of the girl who waited tables and studied late into the night. His words were coated with just enough sarcasm that a few people exchanged uneasy glances. Olivia's smile faltered, a small knot beginning to form in her stomach. Then Christopher turned it darker. He said he had always admired Olivia's strength, but that he also wanted to be sure he was marrying someone for the right reasons. That was why, he continued, he had pretended to lose his fortune a few months earlier, a secret test of her loyalty. A ripple of discomfort passed through the guests. Olivia froze, confusion flashing across her face. She had thought his sudden worries about money had been real, something they had worked through together. She had comforted him, reassured him, stood by him without question. But now he was spinning it as a trap, a game she never agreed to play. Christopher reached into his jacket and, with a dramatic flourish, pulled out his phone. He held it up like a trophy, saying he had proof that Olivia was not as loyal as she claimed. He said he had discovered a text message Olivia had sent to an old friend, joking that if things didn't work out with Christopher, she might have a backup plan. He laughed as he spoke, as if humiliating her on her wedding day was some clever joke everyone else should enjoy. A few stunned gasps echoed around the room, but mostly there was a heavy, suffocating silence. Olivia's cheeks burned. She felt the weight of 100 eyes on her, judging, questioning, doubting. In that moment, it felt like the floor was tilting beneath her. She opened her mouth to defend herself, to explain that the text had been taken wildly out of context, that it had been a silly, nervous joke during a time when Christopher himself had been distant and cold. But the words caught in her throat. No explanation would undo the damage he was so clearly determined to inflict. It was not just about the message, it was about control, about making her small on a day meant to celebrate her strength. From the corner of her eye, Olivia saw her grandfather, Colonel Raymond James, standing tall and still, his eyes sharp and clear. There was a tension in his posture that told her he was ready to step in, to protect her if she needed him. But Olivia also saw something else there: pride. He knew she could stand on her own. For a heartbeat, Olivia thought about fleeing, about running out the doors and never looking back. But then she remembered every hardship she had survived, every tear she had swallowed, every moment she had chosen to rise instead of retreat. She would not give Christopher the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. Instead, Olivia stood silent, shoulders squared, face calm. The music had stopped, the guests sat frozen, unsure what to do. Christopher, emboldened by the silence, smiled as if he had won some sick victory. But he was wrong. This was not his story to define. Olivia knew, deep in her bones, that she was about to take back the narrative in a way he never saw coming. Colonel Raymond James had spent his entire life reading people. On the battlefield, it had been a matter of life and death. In boardrooms and political circles after his retirement, it had been a matter of pride. But nowhere had his instincts been sharper than when it came to protecting his family. The moment he arrived at Olivia's wedding and shook Christopher Blake's hand, something inside him prickled with warning. Christopher's smile was too perfect, his grip too rehearsed, like a man playing a part he didn't fully believe in. Raymond tucked the feeling away for the moment, choosing not to dampen what was supposed to be the happiest day of Olivia's life. But he stayed alert, watching quietly from the second row, eyes never straying far from his granddaughter. As Christopher's speech began, Raymond's unease grew into something heavier, more urgent. At first, he tried to convince himself that maybe it was just nerves or misguided humor. Weddings had a way of stirring up all kinds of emotions, and sometimes people said foolish things when they were overwhelmed. But as the words poured out, cutting Olivia down in front of everyone who loved her, Raymond's stomach turned to stone. This wasn't nervousness. This was cruelty, deliberate and calculated. His hand twitched toward the cane he didn't really need, a silent reminder to himself to stay calm, to wait and watch just a little longer. He glanced around the room, reading the guests like a battlefield map. Faces shifted from smiles to confusion, then to awkward discomfort, and finally to outright horror. Mothers clutched their pearls, friends fidgeted in their seats, young children stared wide-eyed at the grown-ups suddenly behaving in ways they didn't understand. No one moved to intervene. No one dared interrupt what had become a slow, public unraveling. Raymond's heart ached for Olivia, standing so still, so proud even as the ground was being ripped out from under her. He knew that pride. He had seen it before years ago, when she was just a girl with scraped knees and tear-streaked cheeks, stubbornly standing between her little brothers and a landlord threatening to evict them. He had seen it in the letters she wrote him from college, never complaining even when he could read between the lines and see the exhaustion, the loneliness, the relentless climb she was forcing herself through. Olivia had fought too hard, carried too much, to be humiliated by a boy who thought power was measured in how small he could make someone else feel. Raymond made his decision with the same calm clarity he had once used to lead men into battle. He would not let this stand. But he would not storm the altar like some angry old man either. Olivia deserved better than that. She deserved to be defended with dignity, the same way she had lived her life. If Christopher thought he could define this moment for her, he was about to find out just how wrong he was. He shifted in his seat, adjusting the cuffs of his dress uniform jacket, the medals pinned across his chest catching the light. It was a subtle move, but it drew attention. People who had been too stunned to react now glanced toward him, sensing a change in the air. Raymond met Olivia's eyes across the room. In that instant, no words were needed. She saw him. She knew. And somehow, he knew she gave her silent blessing. When Christopher held up his phone again like some cheap magician showing off a trick, Raymond rose to his feet. Not in anger, not in haste, but with a steady, deliberate grace that silenced the murmurs in the room. He moved toward the altar, every step measured, every breath controlled. He was not there to make a scene. He was there to set things right. And as he approached, the guests seemed to instinctively lean back, clearing a path as if they knew they were witnessing something bigger than a ruined wedding. They were about to see what real strength looked like, not the performative kind that mocked and belittled, but the quiet, unwavering strength that stood up for what mattered most. Raymond reached the altar and placed a hand lightly on Olivia's shoulder, a grounding gesture, a promise that she was not alone. Then he turned to face Christopher, who faltered for the first time that afternoon, his smirk slipping as he realized this was not going to go the way he had planned. Raymond didn't need to raise his voice. He never had. His presence alone was enough to shift the balance of power in the room. And he was just getting started. Colonel Raymond James stood tall, his polished shoes firm on the marble floor, his chest rising and falling with a slow, steady rhythm. He faced Christopher Blake directly, meeting the young man's stunned gaze with the kind of quiet authority that needed no introduction. For a long moment, neither spoke. The room, packed with friends, family, and well-wishers, fell into a hush so deep you could hear the faint clink of a champagne glass being nervously set down at the back of the hall. No one knew exactly what was about to happen, but everyone sensed it was something they would never forget. Raymond's voice, when it came, was low but carried through the room with the weight of a man who had spoken life and death into existence. He looked Christopher square in the eye and began, not with anger, but with measured disappointment. He said that when a man stands at the altar, he stands not only to pledge his love but to promise to protect, to honor, and to cherish the woman by his side. And when a man chooses instead to use that sacred moment to humiliate and diminish the woman he claims to love, he shows the world exactly who he is. He spoke not of Olivia's hardships as weaknesses, but as marks of a woman who had survived what most would crumble under. He reminded everyone that while some are handed privilege, others must build their futures with bare hands and stubborn hearts, and Olivia had done just that with more courage and grace than Christopher would ever understand. He did not shout, he did not accuse. He simply laid bare the truth, in a voice so calm it cut deeper than any scream ever could. Christopher tried to interrupt once, his mouth opening as if to defend himself, but Raymond lifted one hand slightly, and the gesture alone was enough to stop him cold. There was no defense for what he had done, and deep down, Christopher knew it. Raymond turned slightly, addressing not just Christopher but the entire room, reminding everyone present that character is revealed not in grand moments of celebration, but in the quiet choices we make when no one is watching, and in the moments when we have the power to lift someone up or tear them down. He said Olivia deserved more than a man who played games with her heart. She deserved a partner who would lift her higher, not one who felt smaller in her light and tried to dim it out of fear. Raymond's voice softened as he turned back to Olivia, pride shining in his eyes. He said she had already won long before today, not because of the ring, not because of the ceremony, but because of the life she had built, the woman she had become, and the strength she carried in every step she took. He then made it clear, in a tone that left no room for argument, that the ceremony was over. There would be no vows exchanged, no promises made under false pretenses. He declared that no granddaughter of his would be tied to a man unworthy of her, and that it was better to walk away from a table where respect was no longer being served than to sit quietly and accept crumbs. The guests remained silent, many blinking back tears, others nodding in agreement. Christopher stood there, stripped of his swagger, his face pale and lost, realizing too late that he had misjudged not just Olivia, but everyone who truly cared about her. Olivia, still standing at the altar, felt the final thread of fear and doubt snap loose inside her. She was not abandoned. She was not broken. She was surrounded by a strength that mirrored her own. Raymond stepped back slightly, giving Olivia the space to choose her next move. It was her moment now. He had cleared the way, but it would be her decision how to walk through it. And Olivia, with the kind of dignity that cannot be faked or stolen, would soon show them all exactly who she was. Olivia stood at the altar for a heartbeat longer, feeling the weight of the moment settle around her like a second skin. There was no music, no clapping, no whispers to guide her. Just silence. A heavy, expectant silence that waited to see what she would do next. She let out a slow, steady breath, one hand rising to her veil. With a calm grace that belied the storm of emotions inside her, she lifted the delicate lace from her hair and pulled it free. The soft fabric floated to the floor at her feet, a quiet symbol of everything she was leaving behind. Then, without hesitation, she slipped the engagement ring from her finger. It glinted under the chandelier lights as she placed it gently on the altar, not thrown in anger, not discarded with bitterness, but set down with the same dignity she had carried through every hardship life had thrown at her. The gesture was so deliberate, so final, that it rippled through the crowd like a wave. Heads turned, mouths opened in shock, but no one spoke. Olivia didn't need words. She didn't need a scene. She simply turned from Christopher, who stood there frozen in disbelief, and began walking back down the aisle. Not rushing. Not running. Every step was measured, strong, as if she was rewriting the story of her life with each footfall. At first, she walked alone. But then she heard the soft shuffle of chairs, the muffled clearing of throats. Her closest friends rose to their feet. Her brothers and sisters followed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, neighbors who had known her since she was a scrappy little girl with dreams too big for their small town. They fell in behind her, a growing tide of support that wordlessly said, "We are with you." No one needed to be told what the right side of history was that day. Outside the chapel, the late afternoon sun was beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting a golden glow over everything. The fresh air hit Olivia's skin like a blessing, cool and full of life. She stopped on the steps, blinking up at the sky, letting the sunlight bathe her face. Before she could gather herself fully, she felt a warm, familiar presence beside her. Her grandfather stepped forward, wordlessly draping a soft shawl around her bare shoulders. The fabric was simple, worn with love, and it smelled faintly of lavender and home. He leaned in, his voice low and steady, and whispered words she would carry in her heart forever. "You walked away with class." Tears prickled at the edges of Olivia's eyes, but she blinked them back. Not out of sadness. Not out of regret. But because she realized that what could have been the worst day of her life had become one of the most defining. She was not a runaway bride. She was not a woman abandoned at the altar. She was a woman who knew her worth too deeply to settle for anything less than respect and real love. The guests who had gathered behind her now mingled on the church lawn, some offering hugs, others simply giving her space, all of them honoring her choice without judgment. Even the vendors, the florist, the musicians, the caterer, approached quietly, offering their services for another day, a better day, if she ever wanted to celebrate her next chapter on her own terms. Olivia smiled at them all, feeling a deep, unshakable peace settle in her chest. She did not look back toward the chapel. She did not spare Christopher another glance. Whatever future he had imagined with her was gone, and it was not hers to mourn. Her future was still bright, still full of possibility, and now it was fully her own. She had walked away from the altar with her head held high, her spirit unbroken, and her heart stronger than ever. The world had tried to tell her that survival was enough, that she should be grateful just to have a seat at the table. But Olivia James knew better. She wasn't meant to survive. She was meant to thrive. And she was just getting started. That night, after the long, heavy day had finally settled into memory, Olivia found herself sitting in a quiet corner booth of a little diner just outside town. The neon sign buzzed softly above the door, casting a gentle glow across the windows. Inside, everything smelled like fresh coffee and old stories. It was a place she and her grandfather had visited often when she was a little girl, back when a hot chocolate and a slice of pie were enough to fix whatever was wrong with the world. Tonight, it wasn't about fixing anything. It was about breathing, about finding a moment of peace after the storm. She stirred her tea absent-mindedly, staring into the cup like it might offer her some kind of answer. Across the table, Colonel Raymond James sat quietly, his hands folded in front of him, letting her have the space she needed without pushing. Olivia was grateful for that. She didn't want to talk about what had happened. Not yet. She wasn't ready to relive it, not when the emotions still felt so raw and close to the surface. Instead, Raymond reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered wooden box. He slid it across the table to her, his face soft but serious. Olivia hesitated before reaching for it, her fingers tracing the familiar carvings on the lid. She had seen this box before years ago, hidden away on the top shelf of her grandfather's closet, but she had never been allowed to open it. Now, it sat before her, waiting. Raymond nodded once, giving her the silent encouragement she needed. Olivia lifted the lid and found a stack of letters tied together with a faded blue ribbon, the color so similar to the one she had wrapped around her wedding bouquet. On top of the stack was an envelope with her name written in careful, flowing handwriting she hadn't seen since she was a child. Her mother's handwriting. Her hands trembled slightly as she picked up the letter and unfolded it. The paper was worn but strong, much like the woman who had written it. Olivia took a steadying breath and began to read. The letter wasn't long. It didn't ramble or try to offer all the answers to life's complicated questions. It was simple, direct, and full of the kind of fierce, protective love that only a mother could give. In it, her mother told her how proud she was, how she knew Olivia would grow into a woman of strength and grace. She spoke of the hardships she knew her daughter would face and urged her never to settle for a love that made her feel small or unworthy. If he ever makes you feel less than the queen you are, walk away. Those words stared up at Olivia from the page, wrapping around her heart and squeezing until the tears finally spilled over. She didn't cry out of sadness. She cried because in that moment, she realized she had honored her mother's wishes without even knowing it. She had chosen herself. She had walked away not in shame, but in strength. And somehow, across the years and the miles and the silence, her mother had been with her all along, whispering through the memories, through the doubts, through the pain. Raymond watched quietly, his own eyes glistening, though he made no move to wipe them. Some moments deserved to be felt fully, without interruption. Olivia clutched the letter to her chest, closing her eyes and letting the weight of the day finally lift from her shoulders. It wasn't the wedding she had planned. It wasn't the future she had imagined. But it was hers. It was honest, it was real, and it was exactly the life her mother had wanted for her. When she finally looked up, she smiled through her tears, a soft, genuine smile that made her look more radiant than any dress or ceremony ever could. Across the table, her grandfather smiled back, raising his coffee cup slightly in an unspoken toast. To new beginnings. To knowing your worth. To walking away when you must, and never, ever looking back. While Olivia found peace that night in the warmth of her grandfather's quiet support and her mother's timeless wisdom, Christopher Blake's world was beginning to collapse in ways he never saw coming. It started small, the way these things often do, like a crack in a window that slowly spreads until the whole thing shatters. A bridesmaid, furious at what she had witnessed at the altar, decided that silence was no longer an option. She had seen enough, heard enough during the weeks leading up to the wedding to know the truth. And she had the texts to prove it. The messages Christopher thought he had sent in private, smug and cruel, surfaced online within hours. Screenshots spread like wildfire, showing him mocking Olivia behind her back, calling her a project he was fixing up for show, betting his groomsmen how long he would stay married to her if she actually went through with the wedding. His words were dripping with arrogance and disdain, painting a picture not of a man betrayed, but of a man who had never deserved the love he was given. At first, Christopher tried to deny it, blaming hackers, claiming the screenshots were fake. But the people closest to him knew better. Too many details were real. Too many patterns fit too perfectly. Sponsors who had once lined up to associate their brands with his polished image quietly pulled their support. Invitations to elite parties and charity galas dried up. Calls from powerful friends stopped coming. Even those who had once admired him turned their backs, unwilling to be linked to the ugliness that was now so plainly visible. The fall from grace was not loud or theatrical. It was slow, humiliating, 1,000 small cuts that bled him dry. News outlets picked up the story, framing it not as a tragic love story gone wrong, but as a cautionary tale about ego, entitlement, and cruelty. Commentators who had once praised his business acumen now dissected his character flaws on live television. Memes flooded social media, turning his once proud name into a punchline. Every time he opened his phone or turned on a screen, he was confronted by his own words thrown back at him, reminders of the man he had chosen to be when he thought no one was watching. Meanwhile, Olivia's name was spoken with admiration and respect. People praised her dignity, her strength, the quiet way she had refused to engage in public mudslinging. She did not post rants or give interviews. She did not explain or defend herself. She simply lived her life, moving forward with a grace that only made Christopher's cruelty stand out sharper in contrast. And people noticed. Women who had once doubted their own worth found inspiration in her story. Men who had stayed silent when friends joked cruelly about their partners began to speak up. A ripple of change started, small but steady, and at the center of it was Olivia James, not as a victim, but as a catalyst for something better. Christopher, watching from the sidelines, realized too late that there was no apology big enough to undo the damage he had caused. No grand gesture could erase the truth now laid bare for everyone to see. He had underestimated Olivia, thinking her strength was only surface deep, something he could control or diminish when it suited him. But real strength, he learned, is quiet, enduring, and utterly beyond the reach of those who seek to tear it down. In the end, Christopher wasn't banned from society or locked out of success forever. Life isn't always that neat. But his reputation carried a scar he could never fully erase. Every new connection, every business deal, every public appearance came with a shadow, a whisper of what he had done, a reminder that character matters far more than charm or ambition. As for Olivia, she never once spoke his name publicly again. She had already given enough of her life to someone who didn't deserve it. Her future was wide open, waiting for her to fill it with a kind of love, work, and purpose that had always been her destiny. And somewhere deep down, in the quiet, lonely spaces Christopher now found himself occupying, he knew he would spend the rest of his life haunted by the moment she chose to walk away, not with bitterness, but with dignity that no one could ever take from her. In the weeks that followed, Olivia James chose not to disappear quietly. She could have hidden away, started over in another town where no one knew her story. But that was never who she was. Instead, she decided to build something out of the broken pieces. Something lasting. Something powerful. With the unwavering support of her family and a growing chorus of women reaching out to share their own stories, Olivia founded the Crowned Heart Foundation, an organization dedicated to empowering women who had been humiliated, manipulated, or betrayed, helping them rebuild their lives with dignity and strength. The name came from a simple idea her mother had once told her, that a woman's heart is like a crown, and no one should ever make her feel she needs to bow her head to keep it from falling. Olivia wanted every woman who had ever been made to feel small to know that they were still queens, no matter what had been done to them. She poured her heart into the foundation, hosting support groups, workshops, and mentorship programs that helped women not only heal but thrive. Word spread quickly. First through social media, then through news outlets eager for a story about resilience instead of scandal. Thousands of messages poured in. Women from all walks of life, young and old, rich and poor, sharing their own heartbreaks and victories. Stories of marriages walked away from, jobs left behind, friendships ended when they proved toxic. Stories of courage and reclaiming power. Olivia read every message she could, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing, always feeling the deep connection that came from shared experiences. She realized that while her own story had been painful, it had also given her a gift, the ability to speak into the lives of others in a way few could. The first press conference announcing the foundation's launch was held at a local community center, a place that had once given Olivia free meals when she was a child. It felt right to start there, among the same simple folding chairs and faded walls that had once cradled her when the world felt too big. She stood at the podium, her voice steady but full of emotion, speaking not as a victim but as a leader, a builder of something new. She talked about second chances, about strength, about never letting someone else's cruelty define your worth. And standing right beside her, in full military uniform, was Colonel Raymond James. He didn't speak much that day. He didn't have to. His very presence was enough, a testament to the power of love, loyalty, and believing in someone even when the world tries to tear them down. When he did step forward briefly, he looked out across the crowd and said simply that real leaders are not made in comfort, but in fire. and that Olivia had taken the fire meant to destroy her and used it to light the way for others. The applause that followed wasn't polite or formal. It was loud, emotional, the kind of applause that fills a room with hope. Cameras flashed. Reporters jotted down notes. But the most important thing that happened that day couldn't be captured on tape. It was the silent, invisible lifting of hundreds of invisible crowns, as women in that room and beyond remembered who they were and what they deserved. As for Christopher Blake, he watched the broadcast alone from a hotel room miles away. No one had invited him. No one even thought to mention his name. He was already a footnote in a story that had outgrown him, a reminder that while cruelty might make headlines, kindness and strength build legacies. There was no satisfaction for Olivia in his downfall. She had long since moved past needing that. Her focus was forward, on the women she could lift, the lives she could change, the world she could help heal. Olivia James had walked away from a wedding, but she had walked into something far greater. She had found her voice. She had found her mission. And in doing so, she had proven that sometimes the best beginnings are born from the moments when everything seems to fall apart. Life often teaches us that true strength is not found in the moments when everything goes right, but in how we carry ourselves when things fall apart. Olivia's story reminds us that dignity, self-respect, and resilience are treasures we must protect at all costs. No matter how deeply we love, we should never allow anyone to diminish our worth or make us question our value. Walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is an act of profound courage when done to honor our self-worth. Especially for those who have weathered the storms of life, it's important to remember that we are not defined by the moments we are hurt, but by how we rise afterward. Staying true to ourselves, even when the world watches, leaves a legacy far stronger than any relationship or title could ever offer. Life will present us with choices between staying in places that shrink us or walking toward futures that allow us to grow. Choosing growth, even when it is painful, leads to deeper peace, real freedom, and new beginnings that honor who we are at our core. If you found value in this message, we invite you to share your thoughts below. What kind of stories or life lessons would you like to see next? Your voice matters to us. And if you want to continue receiving inspiring content that speaks to your heart and reminds you of your strength, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Your journey deserves to be celebrated, and we look forward to walking alongside you in the next chapter.